I am on my way to see an apartment. I'm planning on moving in January, so this is the first apartment that gets back to me. I just saw this apartment in the Bronx, and it's just, the area is so out of the way. I had to take 2 trains and a bus to get here. And even though it's cheap, it's just such an inconvenience to travel. Hello everybody, welcome to today's video. My name is Joanny. If you're new to my channel, welcome. On today's video, I want to share with you my experience looking for an apartment in New York City, and I want to give you some tips in case anyone out there is looking for an apartment right now, so your apartment hunt is not a nightmare like mine was. Not counting my move to New York City, I've moved 10 different times within New York. The last move I've had, which is this apartment, was my 10th time. And even though I've moved 10 different times, this last one was my first time that I've actually spent quite some time looking for an apartment on my own. So I'm off to see another apartment, going to the Bronx again. It's way bigger.
Yeah, so like I said, yeah, it is kitchen, living room together, but at least you're not cramped up. Yeah. Because you can definitely put your couch here on this side.
Yeah.
Either or, because you have outlet here and you have an outlet there, so you can really decide. And then you have a hallway here, so you definitely do feel like you have.
I know, way more space.
Right? It's not like you start over there, like you're one step in the room, right? You take one step in the kitchen,
this is
another
better.
step, you're in the bedroom, another step in the living room. Right? 2 steps
This
further.
is way bigger than the last one.
The other one, you take 2 steps in the bathroom.
I know.
And that's it. That's your whole apartment. Over here, you can at least walk. Feel more free. And it's for the same price, 1500.
This one's also 15?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Maybe 15, 10. Because the landlord has been wanting to increase it, right? Little by little on these apartments.
Oh, okay.
So they make it at 15, 10. But it's still not going to be really.
The first few times I moved, I've had roommates. I lived with people. Like, I knew someone in the apartment and they had a room open, so I moved in with them. My first move, I moved with 2 of my friends, and they had high-paying jobs already. So we applied together and we got the apartment in Brooklyn, and then we moved out and moved to Manhattan. My last apartment, the one before this one, it was a small studio in Harlem. And I got that because they were the only ones willing to work with me and my income. This was like 4 years ago. At the time, I was not making 40 times the rent, which is what management companies usually ask for. But they were linear and they were willing to work with me. So I applied and I got their apartment. And I lived there for 4 years. Before I begin with my tips, I just want to do a disclaimer and say that I am not a realtor. I've moved a lot and I've applied to apartments and I've talked to realtors. So these tips are all based on my own personal experience. But one thing that you will hear a lot, even if you talk to a licensed realtor, is that management companies usually ask for 40 times the rent. So what that means is that if you are applying for an apartment, the management company requires you to make 40 times the rent. So if you're looking for an apartment that's $1,500 a month, the management company wants you to make or have an annual income of $60,000 a year or higher. And that is just a general rule. In Manhattan, some people are more flexible. Like I said, my last apartment, they were willing to work with me because I had good credit and I had savings. So they were okay with me not making 40 times the rent. But some management companies are not as flexible. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're looking for an apartment. I mean, if you have money and if you have millions of dollars on your savings, you should be fine. But if you're just a regular person and you're just wanting to move to New York City, just keep that in mind that if you want to get your own studio or your own 1-bedroom, management is going to ask you to make 40 times the rent, whatever that rent might be. And if you decide to just rent a room, that might be different since you'll be dealing with people that are already in the apartment. There are places like in Brooklyn, like 3 apartments ago, I had roommates, and management, every time like someone left, management will find someone because they were renting the rooms like individual rooms, so everyone in the apartment had their own personal lease. I was paying $850 for one room, but I had to live with like 2 other people, so that's just something to keep in mind. Another tip is that you need to have good credit, and that's just kind of like a general rule for life, I guess. But there are companies that, you know, there's a lot of young people that move to New York City in their 20s and might not have a lot of credit. So there are companies that are open to having someone co-sign the lease with you, like a parent or your spouse. From my conversations with brokers and just kind of applying and looking for apartments in general, management companies want you to have a credit score of 650 or higher. Sometimes it will say it on the listing. Like I saw listings that will say 680 or higher. There was some that said 700 or higher. But the general rule, if you have like 650, that's okay. There was this one time, a long time ago, I applied for the housing lottery at this luxury apartment in Brooklyn. So how the housing lottery works in New York City is that a lot of luxury buildings have a set number of apartments that they get credit for if they rent it out to low-income families. So I applied for a low-income apartment through this housing lottery at this beautiful luxury building in Brooklyn. And they called me. Mind you, this takes forever sometimes. It takes like years and years and years. And it took like 2 years for them to call me. And I was so excited because it was this beautiful apartment. One of the girls from Orange is the New Black lived there. And I only know that because I went to see the apartment. I went to an interview and she was coming out, and the doorman was like, oh yeah, she lives here. And I was so excited. And then I think you need like, there's an income limit for these applications. And for that one, the limit was like $22,000 a year. And I was just making, at the time, this is when I first moved here, I was just making 21,000 and change. I was really close to 22. But they were like, oh no, that should be fine as long as you don't have a lot of debt and yada, yada, yada. And then they checked my credit, and my credit score was 650 at the time. It was 655, and they were like, I'm sorry, it has to be 680 or higher. And I was so mad. I'm like, it's low income. Who has a $700 credit score when you're like that age and making that little money? Anyways, it was so disappointing because I could have had this beautiful apartment in downtown Brooklyn, but because my credit score was not 680, I didn't get it. So that's something to keep in mind. Your credit must be good. At least go for 680. You know, people are willing to work with you if it's 650, but 680 would be better. My next tip is where to find apartments in New York. There are so many websites that you could find. There are Facebook groups. I'm not on Facebook, so I use Street Easy and I use Trulia. I also use Zillow and apartment.com. I started looking for an apartment back in November, mid-November, because that's when I got my lease renewal from my last apartment, and they were raising my rent, and I was like, I am not paying this, I'm out. So I started looking for an apartment because I would look around, and around the area where I lived, I would see apartments for like $1,300, $1,400. So my thinking was that if I found an apartment that was $1,350, $1,400, I was gonna apply for it and just take it because I didn't wanna, I didn't wanna miss my chance. So I started looking for an apartment back in November. It's February now. And it was just so hard. No one was getting back to me. I started going to streeteasy.com because that's where I found my last apartment. But I had no luck with them this time around. This apartment that I'm at right now, I found through trulia.com. And I think I was like the first person that saw this. The guy emailed me And he was like, oh, I'm showing it today, this afternoon. That's another thing. You have to be ready to like go see apartments the day off if someone writes to you. Because this was on a Sunday. I got the email like in the morning. They're like, can you come today? I was like, sure. So I came and I saw it and I applied. And it just took like a week. I applied. I went to an interview with the management person. And then I paid $20 to get my credit check. And then I found out at the end of the week that I was approved. And then the next week, I met with the management company. I brought my security deposit, my first rent, and my broker's fee. And then I got the key and I moved in on February 1st. So the whole process took about a week and a half. But finding this apartment took me 2 months. People told me to use Zillow.com, so I went on Zillow.com and I would apply and I would message people, and no one ever got back to me. The one time that someone got back to me, it turned out to be a scam, and I lost $20, which I will share in a second. But Zillow was not good for me. Apartments.com was also not good for me. And after going through like website to website to website, all the apartments are listed in all the websites. So if you just want to pick one website, just stick to that one, because after like searching for over a month, apartments that I saw on StreetEasy were also listed on Zillow and apartments.com. So just to avoid any stress going from website to website, just pick a website that works for you and you should be fine. For me, the two websites that have worked are StreetEasy.com and Trulia.com. Even though I couldn't find an apartment through StreetEasy, every time I messaged someone there, I did get a response, and I was able to communicate with people on StreetEasy as opposed to like Zillow and apartment.com. No one ever got back to me. So let me tell you the story of how I was scammed out of $20, and I was almost scammed out of $600. If you're moving to New York City and you've never lived here, you have to be mindful about scams, because there are a lot of people out there that take advantage of people that, you know, have never lived here and are planning on moving here, and they don't know how things work. The first thing that you should look out for are apps. If someone tells you to go on an app and apply to this apartment, don't. That's how I lost $20, okay? I was on StreetEasy. I saw this one apartment. It was listed for like $1,080. It was a 1-bedroom. It looked huge, and it was located in Washington Heights. And Washington Heights, that's where that movie In the Heights is based on, with Lin-Manuel Miranda. That's all the way uptown in Manhattan. That's a really nice area. The apartments there are very spacious and big, and they used to be affordable, but not anymore. But I saw this apartment. It was $1,080, and it looked perfect because I wanted to be in Washington Heights. So I messaged them, and they got back to me a week later. They were like, oh, if you're interested in this apartment, you can go on this app and just you can do like a self-tour through the app, and if you're interested, you can apply. So I downloaded the app, I looked through the apartment. So they sent me another email inviting me to apply to the apartment through the app. So I spent like a good 2 hours, because they asked for so many paperwork, and I will get into like the type of paperwork that people ask here. Well, they asked for so much. I spent like 2 hours just uploading documents, and I paid $20 to submit my application. And then like 20 minutes later, they're like, I emailed them. I was like, hey, I just want to let you know that I applied for the apartment. Please be on the lookout for my application, yada, yada, yada. They got back to me. They're like, oh, I'm sorry that that apartment is no longer available. And I was like, then why did you ask me to apply if it was not available? I was so angry. They're like, oh, it's something on StreetEasy, yada, yada, yada. I was like, you guys need to communicate better with your realtors, because if I message you, I got it, if it was not available, why was it listed on Zillow? That's where I saw it on Zillow. And the guy just kept giving me all these excuses. I'm like, no, why are you telling me to apply if it wasn't available? I was so annoyed. Anyways, I didn't get my $20 back. He was like, oh, I'll see if they can give you your $20 back, because it was through some company, through some app. I'll find the email and I'll insert the app over here, so don't use them. because they fucking scam me of $20. And maybe $20 is not a lot of money to some people, but if you do it enough times, if you do it to 10 people in a day, that's $200 a day that you're making out of scamming people, telling them to apply for an apartment when the apartment is not available. And I should have known, because that apartment looked too good to be true. It was like close to $1,100 for this huge 1-bedroom apartment. I should have known that was a lie. Then the next time I was almost scammed out of $600. I went to see this apartment in the Bronx. It was by the Joker steps. You know that scene in the Joker movie where he's like dancing down the steps? That was in the Bronx. And I went up, I had to go up those steps, which was, I was so tired by that. Those steps are pretty long. Oh, look, I ended up at the Joker steps by accident. I did it. I wasn't even trying to do that. But it was by there, and it was a nice area. It was a really nice building. It was a co-op building. So co-op buildings, people that live in those buildings own the apartments, and it's ran by this board, like a co-op board. And this building had a couple apartments that had people living there that they were renting. So not everyone that lived there owned the apartment. So they had one apartment available, and they were renting it. It was $1,500 for a studio, and it was a really nice studio. It was pretty big. Everything was brand new. I went to see it, and I really liked it. But then they were like, it's $600 to apply, and it was a non-refundable. I was like, what? And I was really considering applying for it because I liked the apartment. But I was like, that's $600. And I have a friend who lives in a co-op building, and I told him about it. He was like, yeah, we don't do that in my building. Maybe like if you want to buy an apartment, you have to, there's a fee for the application, but not for renting. And if it is a fee, it's like maybe $100. But this place, it was $150 for the credit check, and then $450 for a processing fee. Lucky, please. Excuse my dog if you hear him. He's in the background. I don't know if you can see him there. Oh wait, no, he's on this side. Anyways, so I was like, that's a lot of money, but I really like the apartment. So I was like, let me ask. I asked a few questions. Some utilities were included, but the thing that I was like, nope, I'm not doing this, was that the building was not a rent stabilized apartment. And that's my next tip, which is if you're moving to New York City, make sure that the building that you're going to move to is rent stabilized, which means that management every year they raise the rent, and they can only raise the rent by what the city tells them, which is usually like a 1-2%. Like my last apartment, every year they raised the rent to like $30, which is why by the 4th year it was $1,700 and I had to leave. But this apartment was not rent stabilized, which means that if they wanted to double my rent next year, they could. I have a friend who lives in Brooklyn in Williamsburg. Williamsburg is a really hip area. A lot of hipsters live there, celebrities. A 1-bedroom over there could go for like $3,000. A 2-bedroom can be $5,000. My friend and her boyfriend live in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. And they only paid $2,200 because her boyfriend has lived there for 10 years. Well, management has been trying to get them out, so they've been raising the rent. The first time they raised it, it was $200. And then the next time they raised the rent, it was an additional $400. And now they pay $2,200. Because if they could rent that apartment like to somebody else, they could charge like $5,000. So you have to be careful. I mean, unless you are rich and you're wealthy and you don't care about that stuff. But if you are just a regular person like me, you don't want your rent to be double by the next year. Just make sure that you live in a building that's rent stabilized. There's one closet. There's no electricity. This is the living room, kitchen. Brand new bathroom. It's a regular bathroom. Okay, nice size closet. Okay. The bedroom. Look, you can see the bridge, which is nice. This is nice. Another nice closet. Okay. Back to the scams. I saw an apartment listing on TikTok. That's another thing. There's a lot of like places that are posting on TikTok that are scamming people. There was an article, someone told me about this person who was pretty much scamming people left and right and making thousands of dollars because they'll post these apartments on TikTok, and somebody in Kansas doesn't know how things work here in New York. So they're like, oh yeah, let me apply, and send this person X amount of money to apply, and then they get denied. I saw this apartment and it said that it was $1,100. It was a two bedroom apartment in East Harlem in New York. East Harlem is not a bad area. It is a little far. I wouldn't like to live in East Harlem because it's so far. It's hard to get to sometimes. There's only like 3 train lines. Anyways, the point is that this apartment looked too good to be true. This can't be. So I messaged them and they were like, oh, to apply is $100. The application fee is $100. So I entered the address of the apartment on Google and it came up on Street Easy, and the same apartment was listed on Street Easy for like $2,200 a month. So I messaged them. I was like, hey, I saw this apartment, the same one you're listing on Street Easy. It has a different price. And then they were like, well, our price is a special that we have for first-time renters, first-time New York City renters. So some random person in Kansas, there's probably like, oh, this is a great deal. And it's just a scam. You do that to 10 people a day, that's $1,000 a day. Anyways, you just have to look out for scams because people are out here taking advantage of people looking for just a place to live. The next thing to keep in mind, I guess my tip, is utilities. A lot of apartments come with heat and hot water included in the rent. So you're responsible for gas and like cooking gas and electricity, which is through Con Edison. But there are other apartments that utilities are not included in the rent. So that's an additional maybe $250 a month that you have to keep in mind when looking for an apartment. If the apartment that you end up getting, it doesn't have any utilities included. So majority of the apartments do have heat and hot water included. My Con Edison bill is usually like $60, $70. Over the summer, it's usually a little more because I had an AC before. So I would turn it on when it was hot. But if you do look for an apartment and it doesn't have utilities included, that's couple $100 that you have to add to your budget if you end up going to the apartment. And on the other hand, there are apartments that have all utilities included, when I was looking for an apartment recently, I saw one in Astoria, which is a part of Queens, here in New York. And it was a studio apartment. It was $1,600 and it had all the utilities included. I messaged them and no one ever got back to me, which was annoying. Actually, a long time ago, maybe like 5 apartments back, I got a studio in Brooklyn in Bushwick. And that was $1,000 a month. And it had all the utilities included, which was great. But then I had to move out because that was like a shady situation that I didn't know about until the city came to investigate the building. And they were like, so the first floor, the person that owned the building turned the first floor into 2 studios, but I didn't know because they had built a wall covering the door that like opened up to the other apartment. So the city came, I don't know what happened, but the city came and the owner called me and they're like, oh, we have to take the wall down. So there's gonna be a door there, just separating you from the other apartment. I was like, no, I didn't feel comfortable with that because you never know. So they were like, you can move out if you want. So I moved out. But that was $1,000. This was a long time ago. This was like 8 years ago. It was $1,000, maybe 10. And they had all the utilities included. And after that, I've never found another apartment that had all the utilities included. I think there are a lot in Jersey, but who wants to live in Jersey? Not me. So when looking for an apartment, heat and hot water should be included in your rent. If not, just keep in mind that might be a lot of money. Hi, it's me in the future. I am finishing up editing this video you're watching right now. There's one tip that I forgot to mention, which is a very important one, is that when you're budgeting for your apartment, you might have to budget a broker's fee. Some apartments in New York do have a broker's fee. There was a law that happened, I don't know how long, a few years ago, that they weren't going to charge for a broker's fee, but I guess that changed because they're charging broker's fee again. When I was looking for an apartment, my last apartment, my broker's fee was 1 month's rent, so it was $15.75. So I needed my deposit, first rent, and a broker's fee, which was $15.75. And then for this one as well, it was the same thing. I had to do first month's rent, security deposit, and 1 month's broker's fee, which was $14.50. But there are some places, there were 2 apartments that I applied to that the broker's fee was 15 times the annual rent, which means that whatever the rent is, multiply that by 12, by a year, and then times that by 15%, and that will be your broker's fee. There was one that was almost $3K. It was like $2,800. There was another one that was $2,200. And sometimes it will say it on the ad, like this is the broker's fee, or it will just say 1 month's rent, security deposit, and broker's fee. And they usually tell you when you see the apartment what the broker's fee is. So that's just something to be aware, that you might have a broker's fee. So when you're moving, and if it's just a room, it might be like $800, $1,000. But if it's an apartment or like a studio, just FYI, you might have to do a broker's fee, and then moving might cost you like $4 or $5K to move. It cost me about $4,200 to move. But for my first month's rent, security deposit, and broker's fee. So just keep that in mind. You might need more than just security deposit and your first month to move. So that is just something to keep in mind when you're looking for an apartment. Just make sure you have enough savings, enough money to move. All right, let's get back to the rest of the video. And those were some of the things to keep in mind when looking for an apartment here in New York City. Another one is like location. I like to live near the subway because once you move here, you're gonna be taking the subway everywhere. That's gonna be your transportation. So I don't like to walk far to the subway. my first apartment when I lived here. I didn't know much about anything. So my apartment was a 15-minute walk from the train, and I hated it because at the time I was waitressing and I would get home really late at night. The trains were like terrible, and I lived in Brooklyn in Bed-Stuy, which back then wasn't that great of an area. Now it's like a lot better. I went back there to a different part of Bed-Stuy and it was a lot better, but like back then when I first moved here, it wasn't. So I had to walk for 15 minutes at like 2 in the morning, and I was so scared. So that's another thing that you can keep in mind when looking for an apartment is location, how far you are from the train. If it's more than 10 minutes, I don't know, depending on like what you're doing, your job or whatnot. But I personally like to be close to the train. If it's like a block away, it's perfect. My last apartment, my last studio, I was only 4 blocks away, which wasn't bad. So those are my tips on looking for an apartment in New York City. I hope your search is stress-free and you find the perfect apartment for your new New York City life. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. That is the video. I hope you enjoy this quick, I don't know if it's quick, I've been recording for 42 minutes. So once I edit it, it will come down to maybe 20, I don't know. But I hope you enjoyed the video and you gained something from it. If you watch this far along, make sure to subscribe. I post videos every week. I post a lot of New York City content and movie content, movie reviews. So if you're into that sort of thing, please consider subscribing and come back next week for my next video. I hope you have a great day or night, wherever you are in the world. Until next time, bye.